Top 5 pure builds in Baldur's Gate 3, Part 2. If you haven't seen Part 1, make sure to check it out, linked in the description. Pact of the Blade, Fiend, Warlock. Warlocks are notorious for consistently being multi-classed into a wide array of builds, and so most people will never know the true power of the level 12 edgelord. Admittedly, I am guilty of this myself, but I do have a little bit of experience with a pure built Warlock, and it is quite fun. It's also easily one of the strongest builds in the game, being able to attack you from any angle, cast their spells at the highest level available, and having several options to choose from while leveling that can drastically change your playstyle, and in some cases giving you 100% complete control over the battlefield. The Warlock is a full caster, meaning by level 12 they will have access to level 6 spells. Their spell slots greatly differ from other classes though, as the Warlock will only gain 3 total spell slots throughout the game. However, these spell slots are always cast at the highest level available, which is related to your Warlock level, and they also reset on short rest, so it's not as bad as you would initially believe. Simply put, compared to other casters, the Warlock can cast less spells per battle, but more high-level spells per day. It's also important to note that you can replace spells when leveling as your spell slots increase in level, meaning you can replace level 1 spells completely with level 3 spells and so forth, as you will always be upcasting anyways. Couple this with the fact that Eldritch Blast is just a complete cannon and you'll rarely run into problems in combat. Also to mention, Eldritch Blast can be so busted that there are builds completely centered around it. Unless you're attacking in melee, Eldritch Blast is likely going to be your main attack, as it's just too good not to use, especially since the Warlock can slightly alter it when leveling, buffing it with more damage and causing it to push enemies back when it hits them. But I'm getting ahead of myself, let's break down this Warlock build starting at level 1. As stated before, there are several options to choose from when leveling the Warlock, and these choices can create completely different builds from one another. Simply put, playing a great old one Warlock with Pact of the Blade is going to be drastically different than playing a Fiend Warlock with Pact of the Tome. So with that in mind, I will go over most choices you can take, and I will ultimately describe one decent pure build you can create towards the end of the entry. Let's dive in. At level 1, the Warlock chooses their patron, which doubles as a subclass. Each patron comes with its own features, unlocking at levels 1, 6, and 10, and a unique expanded spell list. They all have their uses and are each actually really good in their own right. You really can't go wrong with any of them. I'll quickly go over the subclass features of each and display their expanded spell list while doing so. As a general overview, the Fiend is more damage focused, the Great Old One is more controlled focused, and the Archfey is a mix of control and utility. The Fiend at level 1 grants Dark One's Blessing. Whenever you reduce a target's HP to 0, you gain some temporary HP. With a normal pure build at 20 charisma, this would be 17 HP by level 12. It doesn't sound too crazy, but it is a nice little barrier to have, and you can consistently reproc it. At level 6, the Fiend grants Dark One's Own Luck, with which you can add a 1d10 to an ability check similar to Bardic Inspiration or Guidance. This can happen once per short rest, so make it count. At level 10, the Fiend grants Fiendish Resilience, with which you can select any damage type to become resistant to each short rest, and needless to say, this can be extremely useful. There isn't many ways to get certain resistances outside of potions, and this makes Fiendish Resilience quite a rarity and quite powerful. The Great Old One at level 1 grants Mortal Reminder, which is one of my favorite passives. When landing a critical hit, this procs a Wisdom saving throw on enemies within a 3-meter radius, and when failed, will frighten those enemies for 1 turn. This means they can't move and have disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls. Easily one of my favorites. At level 6, the Great Old One grants Entropic Ward, which is a reaction that imposes disadvantage on an attack roll against you. If it misses, you gain advantage on the attacker for 1 turn, and this can be used once per short rest. A solid ability. At level 10, the Great Old One grants Thought Shield, Psychic Resistance, and Reflection. These grant you the titular Psychic Resistance, and also the ability to, when you take psychic damage, the attacker takes the same amount of damage. A really cool ability to have against those disgusting squids and space frogs. The Archfey at level 1 grants Fey Presence, another one of my favorite abilities that charms or frightens enemies in a 3-meter radius and can be used once per short rest. There have been many a time where this has come in clutch for me in the early game especially. At level 6, the Archfey grants Misty Escape, a reaction that, when taking damage, can be used to become invisible. On your next turn, you can then use a free Misty Step at the cost of breaking the invisibility. This can be used once per short rest, and is a nice ability to have and particularly useful on a solo and/or honor mode run. And finally, at level 10, the Archfey grants Beguiling Defenses, which simply causes you to become immune from being charmed. Very, very useful, especially in the late game. As you can see, each subclass has its own reasons for taking them, and it really just depends on how you want to play your character. There really is no wrong choice. At level 2, the Warlock can select 2 choices from a list of Eldritch Invocations. The ones I find especially useful here are Agonizing Blast, which should always be taken, Devil's Sight, and Repelling Blast. The others have their uses, I suppose, but I'd probably really only consider Armor of Shadows outside of the other 3 choices. Taking Devil's Sight can lead you to abusing the Darkness spell, which, as I've said in previous videos, can be used to completely annihilate a solo honor mode run with little to no effort, and that's not even exaggerating. At level 3, the Warlock can select a Pact Boon, which essentially acts as a second subclass and unlocks more features at level 5. Let's go over these real quick. Pact of the Chain grants you the ability to summon an animal familiar, an imp, or a quasit, each coming with their own reasons for summoning, and each being able to extra attack at level 5. Similar to the Beastmaster in a way. I've never made use of this myself, but I can already begin to think of some synergies that might make it pretty decent, especially if multi-classing. Pact of the Blade is probably the strongest and most used, granting you the ability to summon a bound weapon of any type, or simply bind the weapon you're holding. The weapon will now be considered a packed weapon and will use your charisma modifier for attacks instead of the previous strength or dex. It's at this point that most builds using Warlock will completely dump strength if they were using it prior, like with a Paladin multi-class. At level 5, this simply allows the Warlock to make an extra attack after attacking with the packed weapon. Pact of the Tome is for caster-focused Warlocks, initially granting them the Guidance, Vicious Mockery, and Thorn Whip cantrips. At level 5, it also grants Animate Dead, Call Lightning, and Haste, each being able to be used once per long rest, and they don't use spell slots. Call Lightning is particularly nice though with the Warlock because you can recast it while maintaining concentration. These are of course all very useful and powerful spells to have. At level 5, the Warlock gains another Eldritch Invocation, with 2 more choices being added to the list, those being Sign of Ill Omen and Mire the Mind, granting Bestow Curse or Slow respectively. Both are useful, but Slow is particularly one of the strongest control spells in the game. Do note that you can still take any of the Eldritch Invocations you didn't take earlier, and this option remains throughout the game, so I won't mention it going forward. At level 7, you gain another Eldritch Invocation, this time with 3 more choices added to the list. Book of Ancient Secrets grants you 3 decent spells to use once per long rest, similar to Pact of the Tome. Dreadful Word gives you the Busted Confusion spell, like Slow being one of the best control spells in the game, and Sculptor of Flesh gives you Polymorph. At level 9, again, you select another Eldritch Invocation, with 3 more choices added to the list. Those options allowing you to conjure Elemental, Enhance Leap for free, or Speak with Dead for free. The Warlock only gains access to level 5 spell slots, but at level 11 it gets Mystic Arcanum, where their patron allows them to select a level 6 spell to use for free once per long rest. I know I said earlier that the Warlock is a full caster, which is kind of a lie, but it's kind of not a lie. Don't sue me. These choices are Arcane Gate, Circle of Death, Create Undead, Eye Bite, and Flesh to Stone. And finally, at level 12, you gain 1 more Eldritch Invocation, with 1 more being added to the list, specifically for Pact of the Blade users. Life Drinker adds additional necrotic damage equal to your charisma modifier to attacks with the packed weapon. Definitely something to have if you've taken that route. For the spells, I'll list my favorites from the regular Warlock list, meaning this doesn't include any of the spells granted from the expanded list of each subclass. My favorite cantrips are Eldritch Blast, Blade Ward, Bone Chill, and Friends. My favorite level 1 spells are Armor of Agathis, Arms of Hadar, Hex, and Witch Bolt if you exploit the wet condition. My favorite level 2 spells are Cloud of Daggers, Crown of Madness, Darkness especially, make sure to grab this, Hold Person, Mirror Image, and Misty Step. My favorite level 3 spells are Counterspell, Fear, Hunger of Hadar, Hypnotic Pattern, and on an off day I like Vampiric Touch. Level 4 spells are any of them, and the only level 5 spell is Hold Monster, so make sure to grab that. Now on to the quick build, trying to keep it as simple as can possibly be in the Warlock's case. Starting stats are Strength at 8, Dex at 14, Constitution at 15, Intelligence at 8, Wisdom at 12, and Charisma at 17. Use the Hag's Hair to boost Charisma to 18, and then use your first ability improvement to boost Charisma to 20. Second feat is Resilience Constitution to greatly help with concentration checks and raise Constitution to 16. Third feat can be any of your choosing. As usual, I like Alert. Subclass can also be any of your choosing, but for the purposes of this video, we will take the Fiend. For the 6 Eldritch invocations in order, take Agonizing Blast, Devil's Sight, so make sure to get the Darkness spell, Repelling Blast, Dreadful Word, Minions of Chaos, and Life Drinker. For the Pact boon, take Pact of the Blade. Real quick, please make sure to like and subscribe. It changes everything for me and puts these videos in the algorithm. Thank you. Now back to the video. College of Swords, Bard. Bard is another class that is notorious for multi-classing, and it's also known for being an extremely powerful monoclass build in the cases of the Colleges of Lore and Swords. For today's entry, we will discuss the College of Swords as 1, it's my favorite, and 2, it's one of the most fun playstyles to be had in Baldur's Gate 3, in my opinion. Being a charisma class and having Bard dialogue choices, it's also just one of the best experiences as the face of the party throughout the game. It's also the only class that naturally gains the musical instrument proficiency and starts with an instrument of your choosing. At level 1, you gain Bardic Inspiration, which allows an ally to add 1d6 to their next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. This increases to a 1d8, then a 1d10 at levels 5 and 10 respectively. This is always going to be extremely useful throughout the entire game and can be used multiple times as long as the Bard has Bardic Inspiration charges, which recharge on long rest to begin with. At level 2, Bards gain Song of Rest, which functions as an extra short rest, healing you and giving you all of its benefits. This recharges on long rest, another ability that is useful throughout the entire game and makes Warlocks particularly fond of Bards. You also gain Jack of All Trades, which simply adds half your proficiency bonus to ability checks you're not proficient in, essentially just making you a better party face. At level 3, Bards gain Expertise in 2 skills they're proficient with and can now select their subclass. The colleges of Lore, Valor, or Swords. Lore is the best for caster-focused bards, Valor is considered the weakest, but is a martial-based bard, and Swords is also a martial-based bard, but is far stronger than Valor. If you want to play a caster, you should always choose College of Lore, which grants you Cutting Words, a reaction with the ability to force a minus 1d6 penalty to the attack roll, ability check, or saving throw of an enemy. At level 6, they can learn 2 non-bard spells with magical secrets, which is most people's biggest reason for taking College of Lore, and arguably makes it the actual strongest bard subclass, along with Cutting Words of course. Nevertheless, College of Swords is today's focus, and with this, the bard first gains medium armor and scimitar proficiencies. They also gain the choice of fighting style between dueling or 2-weapon fighting, with reasons for taking either that pretty much amount to what weapons you want to use. It never hurts to respect for the other fighting style if you find a certain weapon or 2 that you might like more. Now on to the fun part, the flourishes. These are similar to maneuvers, but are of course unique to the bard, and each can be used with melee or ranged weapons. Each flourish deals weapon damage plus your bardic inspiration bonus, that being a 1d6, 8, or 10, depending on bard level, so these are quite powerful. Defensive flourish simply increases your AC by 4 if you hit the enemy. Nothing much to say other than this is especially useful if you think you're going to take big damage or are playing solo. Slashing Flourish functions like Horde Breaker from the Hunter Ranger, allowing you to attack 2 enemies that are nearby each other for the cost of only 1 action. The melee version is like a Cleave, but makes 2 separate attack rolls, and the ranged version functions how you'd expect. Having this at level 3 is extremely useful, considering you can technically make more than 1 attack per turn before level 5. This ability stays useful throughout the entire game. Mobile Flourish is my favorite ability, and I think it's the most unique. With this, your attack pushes the target up to 6 meters away, and then gives you a free action to teleport to the target if you're within range. This is a versatile ability that increases the mobility and control of the bard, and is also just really satisfying to use. This has always been one of my biggest reasons for taking College of Swords, just based on fun factor alone, as it never really gets old. At level 6, the College of Swords bard can make an extra attack, like normal martial classes, and is the reason for taking the subclass to at least this level. The rest of what the bard gets are the reasons for taking it as a pure monoclass build, that being the features but also the spells you can attain. At level 5, all bards gain Font of Inspiration, which now allows all bardic inspiration charges to reset on short rest rather than long rest, and the dice are now D8 as mentioned before. At level 6, all bards gain an interestingly powerful ability with Counter Charm, which can be placed anywhere on the battlefield and gives you and allies within 9 meters advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened. This is actually overpowered, as not only does it protect the party from debilitating conditions, it is immune to all damage, and enemies will sometimes target it and waste their attacks on it. At level 10, bards gain expertise in 2 more skills they're proficient with, and bardic inspiration increases to a 1d10. But the big feature and main attraction here is magical secrets, which allows the bard to learn 2 non-bard spells from the magical secrets list, which includes a plethora of spells. Way too many to list here, but there are some extremely powerful choices here, like Spirit Guardians, which works especially well with the Swords Bard, Haste, which will bust the build as usual, and Banishing Smite, which is unique in that only the Bard can attain it prior to patch 8. These are only 3 spells of the expanded list you can choose from, and it cannot be overstated how your choices here can really tip your Bard over the edge of being decently powerful to stupidly overpowered. With that being said, I will now list my favorite spells at each level for the Bard spell list according to the College of Swords. Also note that while leveling, the Bard has the option to replace spells. My favorite cantrips are Vicious Mockery, Blade Ward, and Friends. My favorite level 1 spells are Dissonant Whispers, Longstrider, Sleep, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and Thunderwave. My favorite level 2 spells are Crown of Madness, Enhance Ability, Heat Metal, and Hold Person. My favorite level 3 spells are Fear, Glyph of Warding, Plant Growth, and Stinking Cloud. My favorite level 4 spells are all of them. My favorite level 5 spells are Dominate Person, Hold Monster, and Plantar Binding. My favorite level 6 spell out of the 2 would have to be Eye Bite. For the quick build, starting stats are Strength at 8, Dex at 16, Constitution at 14, Intelligence at 8, Wisdom at 12, and Charisma at 16. For the first 2 feats, raise Dex to 20 unless you do so with gear, and third feat can be any of your choosing. You already know I'm taking Alert. If you're playing a shooter bard, take Sharpshooter. I would take this as your first or second feat if this is the case. If you're playing melee, you could also consider Dual Wielder. One of my favorite builds from Minthara is a Dual Wielder multi-class of Swords Bard and Vengeance Paladin. Busted is the biggest understatement. Make sure to increase Charisma or Spell Save DC with gear, and also look out for gear that buffs Constitution or Concentration. For magical secrets, I would at least take Spirit Guardians. The other option is up to you. Oath of Vengeance Paladin. Come on guys, you knew this had to be on the list. Paladin is by far the most popular class in the game, and it's also one of the most powerful. This is yet another class that notoriously gets multi-classed, and so today we will discuss the features that make Paladin worth taking as a pure monoclass build, the Oath of Vengeance in particular, not only because it's literally me, but because it is objectively the strongest subclass. Paladin equal Purge evil. Starting at level 1, the Paladin can lay on hands, which heals themselves or an ally for a set amount of HP based on level, or can be used to cure the target of all diseases or poisons. This ability is extremely useful and will be used throughout the entire game. The healing becomes quite powerful and can really save you in a pinch. The Paladin can also channel their Oath to use several abilities unlocked while leveling that are determined by which subclass you choose. In the case of Vengeance, at level 1, you start with Inquisitor's Might. This buffs yours or an ally's weapon attacks with bonus radiant damage equal to your Charisma modifier and can daze their targets. This is actually quite decent in the early game and somewhat during Act 2, but you likely won't be using it much by Act 3. if at all. All paladins gain Divine Sense, which simply gives them advantage on attack rolls against celestials, fiends, or undead, and can be used once per short rest. At level 2, the paladin can now Divine Smite. This is the paladin's bread and butter, and can deal some of the most extreme damage in the game, especially when landing a critical. Divine Smite doesn't use a spell slot when it misses, and doesn't have to be selected before attacking. Rather, when you hit, you'll have the option to smite the enemy as well, which will deal an additional 2d8 radiant damage and a bonus 1d8 on top of that if the target is a fiend or undead. Upcasting the Divine Smite will see its damage increase by another 1d8 for each level. This is one of the most busted abilities in the game, and also one of the most satisfying. You can also smite multiple enemies with one attack when performing actions like Cleave, which is just badass. Also at level 2, you can select a fighting style, the best choice almost always being Great Weapon Fighting, which you'll pair with Great Weapon Master when taking feats. At level 3, the Paladin gains Divine Health, which now prevents them from being afflicted with any disease. You'll also unlock more subclass features here, Channel Oath abilities, and Always Prepared spells, with Oath of Vengeance getting a decent upgrade. For the Channel Oath abilities, first we have Abjure Enemy. This frightens the target, condition described earlier, but in this case, fiends and undead specifically have disadvantage on the saving throw. Also, if the target saves, they become slowed instead of frightened, and these conditions both last for 3 turns. The second Channel Oath ability, the Paladin gains Vow of Enmity, which simply gives them advantage on attack rolls against the target. Funnily enough, this can be used on yourself, which will give you advantage against every enemy, so just do that instead. Extremely useful to say the least, and something you'll likely use often, and will probably miss if you break your oath. The always prepared spells are Bane and Hunter's Mark, Bane not being used much, but Hunter's Mark being quite nice to have as the Paladin. Using this, I like to equip the Strange Conduit Ring for extra psychic damage pretty much all the time. At level 5, you gain extra attack, and you also gain 2 more always prepared spells based on your oath. For Vengeance, this gives us the absolutely busted Hold Person and Misty Step, both extremely useful spells for the Paladin to have, pretty much turning them into a relentless crusading maniac. Level 6 grants all Paladins the Aura of Protection, which is reason enough to take Paladin to at least 6 if considering a multi-class, as this stays active so long as you're conscious and gives you and allies within 3 meters a bonus to saving throws equal to your charisma modifier. Always make sure to have this active. At level 7, each oath gains a unique aura or feature, and for Vengeance, this will be Relentless Avenger, which is a bit situational, granting you a bonus 4.5 meters of movement speed on your next turn when you hit an enemy with an opportunity attack. This can be paired nicely with the Sentinel feat, but it's definitely not mandatory. At level 9, Paladins will gain their final always prepared spells based on their oath, and for Vengeance, this will be Haste and Protection from Energy. You already know how busted Haste is, and Protection from Energy you'll likely not use much. Gaining Haste here is a huge reason to take Vengeance Paladin specifically to at least 9. Further, at level 10, all Paladins gain Aura of Courage, preventing you and allies from being frightened. I don't know why I just thought about the original RoboCop scene where he dies in the beginning of the movie. It's like super brutal and it traumatized me as a kid. I don't know why I just thought about it right there. I wish I had Aura of Courage when I was a kid. And at level 11, we have probably the biggest reason for taking a Paladin to 12 as a pure monoclass build, that being Improved Divine Smite. This adds a 1d8 radiant damage bonus to every melee attack you make, and a 2d8 bonus if you land a critical hit. This is just for regularly attacking, so it doesn't use a spell slot at all. It's just a passive feature. You can then upcast your actual Divine Smite when landing a hit to deal even more damage. The Paladin already deals big damage prior to this, but adding that bonus to every attack is quite ridiculous. Be careful around those Radiant Retort enemies though. The Paladin, while having to long rest often, objectively can deal some of the biggest damage in the entire game in a single turn, especially against fiends and undead, or just a single attack, mind you. For a quick build, starting stats are Strength at 16, Dex at 12, Constitution at 14, Intelligence at 8, Wisdom at 8, and Charisma at 16. You could also split Dex and Wisdom 10-10. First feat is ability improvement to increase strength to 18. Obtain the Potion of Everlasting Vigor at the beginning of Act 2 to cap strength at 20. Second feat will be Great Weapon Master, and third feat can either be ability improvement to raise charisma to 18, or of course, alert, Light Domain Cleric. Come on guys, you knew this had to be on the list. I've made it no secret that I believe Cleric to be the best class in the game, if not for any other reason than being extremely powerful at anything they want to do, whether it be damaging, healing, supporting, or controlling. The Cleric is, in my opinion, by far the most versatile class in the game, as it not only fills these roles, it excels at doing so. The biggest reason for this is not only their innate spell list and abilities, but the option of choosing from several different domains, each offering their own unique features that set them apart from one another and can result in completely different playstyles. Even the Trickery domain, the most hated and weakest subclass, is still powerful enough in its own right to warrant a level 12 build. There's a reason why it's generally considered essential to have a Cleric in your party, at least in original D&D. Tempest domain has a big argument for taking this spot, but Light domain ultimately will be our Cleric entry, as it is one of the most OP subclasses out of all subclasses in the game, and requires less busy work than Tempest domain, making it much more accessible while delivering some of the best damage and control possible throughout the game. Starting at level 1, the Cleric chooses from several domains, all acting vastly different from one another, and with our choice of Light domain, we first gain Warding Flare. This is a reaction that imposes disadvantage on an incoming attack, which is quite useful literally throughout the entire game, especially right from the beginning, and will often cause the attack to miss. We also gain 3 domain spells, those being first the Light Cantrip, which actually becomes a mechanic for combat later on, Burning Hands, which is a goated spell, and Fairy Fire, which I really don't use much, but it does have its place, and I'm sure there are people who make much better use of it than I have. It's also important to note that all domain spells are always prepared, and the regular Cleric spells can be changed at will when out of combat. At level 2, all Clerics gain Turn Undead, which causes undead creatures in a large radius to flee for 3 turns, and gets a huge damage buff at level 5. Also, the Light domain gains Radiance of the Dawn, which is a completely busted ability that deals a massive 2d10 plus your character level radiant damage to enemies in a 9-meter radius. This is one of, if not the strongest crowd killer in the entire game, and it's also one of the most satisfying, especially with Radiant Orb gear. At level 3, the Cleric gains 2 more always prepared spells, with the Light domain gaining Flaming Sphere and Scorching Ray. Flaming Sphere is nice to have early on as it is a summon, so it can not only deal damage, but it also takes attention from you or your party members. Scorching Ray is a classic evocation spell that's always nice to have, so there's not much to say there, but it definitely is one of the most used spells in the game. At level 5, Turn Undead gets the Destroy Undead buff, turning into a radiant damage nuke against undead enemies, dealing a massive 4d6 radiant damage as well as turning them, if they're still alive. This, combined with Radiance of the Dawn, is just ridiculous. You also gain 2 more domain spells, those being Daylight and Fireball. Daylight is particularly useful during Act 2, and with a certain boss in Act 3 relating to Astarion. It's quite nice to have always prepared, and Fireball speaks for itself. Everybody knows this is one of the strongest evocation spells in the game, even more so than some higher level spells. At level 6, the Warding Flare can now be used to protect allies, and at level 7 we gain another 2 domain spells. Guardian of Faith is a very good spell to make use of, acting as retaliatory defense with the likelihood of killing enemies for you for a limited time. Wall of Fire is another spell that speaks for itself, and is actually quite busted in my experience. At level 8, all Clerics gain a domain feature, with the Light domain gaining Potent Spell Casting, a minor but nice passive buff that adds your Wisdom modifier to the damage of your cantrips. Level 9 sees the final addition of domain spells, and the Light domain gets 2 of my favorites, both powerful in their own right and also satisfying, like this whole class. Destructive Wave is a massive AoE centered on the Cleric that deals 5d6 thunder damage plus your choice of 5d6 radiant or necrotic damage, and only affects enemies, so no worries about hitting your allies. It also has the chance to knock the still surviving enemies prone. This is easily one of the coolest spells in the game. Lastly, we have Flame Strike, which is a ranged AoE that deals another massive 5d6 fire plus 5d6 radiant damage. Another extremely satisfying and powerful spell to use. There is a catch though, that being the halving of damage on a successful dex saving throw, and the same for Destructive Wave, but with a con saving throw. The reasons for monoclassing Cleric do not end there. Further, leveling to 10 will grant all Clerics Divine Intervention, which can only be used once per playthrough, so make sure to make it count. With this, the Cleric can call upon their deity to deal 8d10 radiant damage to all enemies in a 15-meter radius, spawn a legendary weapon for you, revive dead companions, or you can ask them to give a bunch of potions and camp supplies. The best option is almost always to take the weapon, and this mechanic can be exploited as the weapon doesn't leave your inventory even if you respec completely out of Cleric. And at level 11, the Cleric gains access to some very powerful level 6 spells, so that alone is worth taking it even further. Now, because the Cleric's regular spell list is reason enough alone to monoclass a Cleric, and nearly all of them are worth using to some capacity in different situations throughout the game, I won't be listing off my favorites as they all really are just that useful, and you may find yourself often swapping a spell or two out for specific encounters and locations. You can see on screen, the Cleric list is just absurd. It's literally the best class in the game. Now for the quick build, starting stats are Strength at 12, Dex at 14, Constitution at 16, Intelligence at 8, Wisdom at 16, and Charisma at 8. Increase Wisdom to 20 with 2 feats or through various other means. And for the third feat, you already know I'm taking Alert. Constitution will be buffed through gear. Draconic Bloodline Sorcerer, red or white. The ultimate arch nemesis of the wizard, the Sorcerer as a whole is extremely overpowered and can absolutely dominate any run, solo or not. This has a serious chance of taking the spot as the most powerful monoclass build in the entirety of Baldur's Gate 3. If you've looked up builds at all for this game, you've more than likely come across the thousands of posts talking about how absolutely broken Sorcerer becomes with meta magic, haste, and fireballs. I mean, pretty much that's all it comes down to, right? Well, usually that's a segue for saying wrong, but that's actually pretty true. Sure, there is some nuance and versatility to be had with meta magic, but if you just want to play the game on easy mode, those 2 spells with meta magic is all you'll ever need. And it's at that point that most people will stop leveling the class outright. There is, however, several reasons to take Sorcerer all the way to 12, so let's see what else the Sorcerer brings to the table and what really cements it as one of the best pure monoclass builds. Right out the gate, you choose your subclass, and Draconic Bloodline is objectively the best. I love Storm, but Draconic is undeniable. With this, your base AC is always 13 whenever not wearing armor, and your max HP increases by 1 each level. You can then choose from several different Draconic ancestries, all focusing on a certain damage type and all coming with a spell of that type. Some of these are obviously better than others, and the best 2 to choose from, in my opinion, will be the red and white ancestries, focusing on fire and cold respectively. The white is particularly unique as Armor of Agathis is originally only available to Warlocks. It's also important which ancestry you choose here, as when you reach level 6, you gain Elemental Affinity. This adds your Charisma modifier to spells of that same damage type, and you can also spend a sorcery point to gain resistance to that type. If you took Cold or Lightning Ancestry, this is another build that benefits from exploiting the wet condition more so than others, like the Tempest Cleric. At level 11, Draconic Bloodlines can fly, so if you don't want to become half a Lithid or have to pop the spell, this is always really nice to have. Now diving into what all sorcerers obtain, it's important to remember that while you will be busted by level 5, taking the sorcerer further can drastically increase your lethality, not only due to accessing level 6 spells, but just from the simple fact of unlocking more sorcerer points, which will allow you to use more meta magic between short and long rests. Meta magic is not to be understated. It is the most busted ability any spellcaster can attain, especially when combined with haste. There are 7 meta magic options to choose from when leveling, and you'll gain access to a total of 4, with your last one unlocking at level 10. At level 2, you'll gain your first 2 meta magics, sorcery points to use them with, and also the abilities to create spell slots and sorcery points. You first have 4 options to choose from, and no matter what, your very first meta magic should always be Twinned Spell, This allows you to launch a spell at 2 targets rather than 1, while still only using 1 spell slot and only 1 sorcery point, which again are purely there to fuel the meta magic. Right from level 2, you already have more action economy than most classes with this meta magic, and you'll use this throughout the entire game to absolutely annihilate the enemy. The second meta magic you take isn't as important, but the other 3 are all useful in their own right. I usually choose between careful and extended spell depending on my party and how I want to play, but for the most part I generally take extended spell as it literally doubles the duration of spells that leave conditions, surfaces, or are summons. That means you can Blade Ward for 4 turns or even fear a group of enemies for 4 turns. The other one to take would be Careful Spell, which causes your allies to succeed any saving throws your spells might cause, and is quite useful if you plan to play in a party and aren't being careful. At level 3, you gain another meta magic and can choose from the whole selection. Subtle Spell can be absolutely exploited, but that requires a specific playstyle, and so Quickened Spell is always going to be the option to take here, simply just letting you cast a spell using a bonus action instead of an action. So basically, once reaching level 5, you can haste yourself, twin spell 2 spells using your action, and then cast another spell on top of that using your bonus action. The Sorcerer is stupid. You unlock a 4th meta magic at level 10, and by then you'll know exactly which one to take just from your own playstyle, but you'll really mainly be using the first 3 or really just 2 of them, those being Twinned and Quickened Spell. Absolutely ludicrous. The Sorcerer can learn from a wide array of spells, but unlike the Wizard, they can't swap them out when out of combat, they're all learned directly. This means that when leveling, you'll have the chance to replace older spells if need be. I don't find it necessary for a list here as you'll just be blasting fools the entire game, and so for a quick build, starting stats are Strength at 8, Dex at 14, Constitution at 16, Intelligence at 8, Wisdom at 12, and Charisma at 16. First 2 feats to boost Charisma to 20, and the last feat can be anything. For me, you know it has to be Alert. Buff your Constitution saves with gear and you're good to go. If there's anything I missed, let me know down in the comments. I hope to see y'all in the live streams and Discord, and if you want access to written builds and guides and to support the channel, the Patreon is linked below. Thank you all for watching, thank you to my supporters for making this channel possible, and until next time, Purge.
Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah, crown in my palm, but I ain't put it on. Yeah.